What I want from life determines what I consider as should be done. Thus the question, what ought I to do, may be answered only with reference to what is considered as purpose of one's life. In this light, the issue that remains important for morality is what should be considered as significant in human life, for that alone will decide what I should do. Sanskrit recognizes two sets of people, depending on the purpose of life. One kind considers attainment of self as the goal, and the other wants to achieve heaven. For the first kind, it is acquisition of knowledge which is important, while for the second, it is actions that will bring heaven to them. It is attainment of self which is actually important in Sanskrit. We see it as Sanskrit advocates knowledge. The reason for its advocacy is that knowledge of the self is the one that makes one overcome death. That Sanskrit opposes actions for result is clear from the fact that it declares that action for fruit will not be able to make us go over death. Sanskrit is against desire for fruit of action itself, as it identifies desire with death, desire with its effect of wrath and delusion. Now the question is, what happens when we get the knowledge of the self? Sanskrit says that by following the right path, we become the Supreme Self. So that is why it actually suggested that we should have knowledge of the self. Then we will become the Supreme Self. It considers that the Supreme Self cannot be found anywhere except in the man of high vows. Quote, "It dwells not in earth, nor in the sky, nor does it bear a body in this ocean-like world. It is not to be seen in Rik, nor in Yajus, nor in Atharvan, nor in the pure Saman, nor yet, O king, in the Rathantara or Brihadratha hymns. It is to be found only in the self of high vows." Unquote. Sanskrit thus identifies Supreme Self with Brahman, on which the world rests, and says that it is through understanding of this that one becomes immortal. However, this Brahman appears to be capable of being understood only with the help of self. It has been observed that Brahman, that is identified as the Supreme Self, is regarded as a foundation of the universe. Now, Sanskrit considers truth also as a foundation of the universe. And it also says that immortality depends on truth. In other words, Sanskrit is identifying Supreme Self with truth. It holds the truth to be only one. It says that it is lack of knowledge of that one, because of which multifariousness emerges. Quote, "Through ignorance of the one Veda, the one truth, O King of Kings, numerous Veda came into existence." Unquote. Sanskrit says that it is only adherence to truth, the Brahman, that makes one a Brahmana. So by implication, one who is dedicated to many cannot be a Brahmana. And because truth is one, therefore when we know truth, it is said that we are omniscient. According to Sanskrit, there are no things apart from the Supreme Self. It can consider going out in search of enjoyment of object as delusional. So it is only because we do not think that there is one, that we do not know that there is only one, we go out in search of enjoyment. But the Supreme Self is considered as a not different from self itself by Sanskrit, for it says that enjoyment of object is sought by one who has not understood the identity of self and the Supreme. In other words, it has now identified the self with the Supreme. Therefore, the knowledge of the self is so important. Thus, Sanskrit can say that the one whose self is contaminated by the unreals actually deliberates on the object. So only when we are attached with the unreals, we start thinking about the objects. Quote, having his inner self contaminated by contact with unreal entities, he devotes himself to objects of sense on all sides, pondering only them. Unquote. According to Sanskrit, it is the contemplation of on the objects that leads to desires for them, which when not fulfilled gives rise to wrath. And it is desire and wrath which in fact are considered as causes of death. So the more we think, the desire we have not fulfilled, we have wrath, and they cause us death. Now it appears to be identifying death with transmigration. On one hand, it says that it is with the unreal objects that there is the development of desire, which ends up in death. On the other hand, it is saying that contact with unreal entities make one migrate. So we can identify death, transmigration, and desire. The reason for an identification of death and migration may be attributed to the fact that transmigration implies repeated death. In fact, it is only when one understands transmigration as a death that one can really appreciate desire and death being identified. As one desires, one needs to continue for fulfillment of desires, birth after birth. This is transmigration, involving repeated deaths and simply death. Sanskrit is clear that it is a desire which is to be gotten rid of, as it is desire wherein death or destruction lies. Quote, the being who pursues desires is destroyed in pursuing after desires, but casting over desires, a being gets rid of all taint whatsoever. Unquote. In fact, the answer to the question why Sanskrit regards knowledge as desirable lies in the very fact of undesirableness of desire. Sanskrit says that it is contemplation on self that helps us from not thinking about objects. Further, in knowledge, as one comes to realize itself to be not different from Supreme Self, which is the only real, one comprehends that there are no other objects for desiring. This leads to ending of desire and consequently of death. Thus it is declared that it is in knowledge that there is no death. Quote, he who, pondering on self, destroys the fugitive objects of sense, not even thinking of them, through contempt for them, and who, being possessed of knowledge, destroys desires in this way, becomes, as it were, death of death, and swallows it up. But the knowledge we are talking about is not knowledge in the ordinary sense, in Sanskrit. First, this knowledge of Supreme cannot be gained by knowledge of objects, though knowing it makes us know the objects, so it cannot be gained by knowing objects. Second, it cannot even be gained by learning the Vedas. Supreme Self or Brahman is not in the field of words, language, thought. However, Sanskrit recognizes the role of the Vedas in attainment of knowledge. It says that though the Vedas cannot give knowledge of the real, they do help to reach the knowledge by being pointer to the truth. To have the knowledge of Brahman, or rather for the Brahman to reveal itself, one has to contemplate on it after hearing about it. So that is how Vedas help us to gain the knowledge of the Supreme. One who stays faithful to Brahman can use the Vedas for the purpose of gaining knowledge of Brahman and can in fact achieve that knowledge.
Thank you.
I had mentioned that we should move from convenience to correctness. So when you do things conveniently, then it is not possible. If somebody is pushing you towards corruption, for example, right? If you find it convenient to submit, then you are actually in the third window that I talked about, where you are giving up your self-respect, doing something that someone else wants. You respect the other person, so you are being submissive. Yeah. Yes. It is possible. And the second part is, even if you're doing it under pressure, your father tells you to pay a bribe to get things done, say the corporation. You actually hand over the bribe. So the karma is yours. You are handing over the money. But it was not with the intention to bribe. It was because he is doing it and I am only a messenger. As he mentioned rightly, the messenger is not responsible. You are not so much at fault. You will get 5%, maybe not 95%. But if you don't do it, then that is akarma. You say, I will not do it, then you must pay for that. So you'll have to pay for everything you do and everything you don't do. Either you pay good or you pay bad. Which one is up to you?
The point of this conference is to understand what is Karya and Akarya. There have been a lot of people who have spoken excellently, and then we had an opportunity to listen to all of them, but I just wanted to particularly point out this session, and particularly two people who are a lot elder to many people like us who are very younger. Inspirational talk to listen to these two people, the ones who just presented, that itself shows what is Karya. Like, even in that age, to be excellent orator and also to communicate the content, so keeping the command over the audience and command over their subject, and being precise to the point and not going here and there, and also at the same time so substantial. It had a lot of substance. So that itself is like, this is Karya, and the contrary is Akarya. So that I just wanted to share with you.
Thank you for your comment.